Growing up, I had the world's best grandma. She was the gold standard of grandmas. She was my dad's mom, this very cute little Italian lady straight off the boat from Calabria. She could barely speak English, and she certainly couldn't read any. She would take the bus from her house in Union City, New Jersey, to our house in Ridgefield, New Jersey, with this enormous pot of chicken soup on her lap, and all of these supermarket bags filled with goodies for me and my brothers around her feet. Somebody would help her get off the bus at our corner, and we would be there to take her home. Now, it goes without saying that the chicken soup was to die for. But what always blew my mind, and blew my brothers' minds, was how she always got right all of the junk food that we loved. You know how she did it? She took the packages of our favorite junk food to the supermarket, and she matched them. Now that's love. I loved my Grandma Vicky. She fed us, she sugared us. I'm telling you, she was the best. I was a junior in high school when she passed away. And I recall my dad sitting in his chair with the TV off. And I said, "Hey, Pop, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm just thinking about Grandma. I miss her. Sometimes I'm not sure what I'm going to do without her." And I didn't know what to say. I was a kid, for God's sake. And since I probably only poked my head in there to ask for money to go to the mall, the best I could do to assuage my guilt was give him a kiss and tell him I love him and get out of there. So fast forward many years later, I'm married, I've got 2 kids. My dad was almost as good a cook as my grandma. After her death, though, he started making her meals for us. And when he made her meals for us, he told us stories about her, about the old country, about my grandpa, what life was like for them there, and what life was like for them when they came to the United States. In doing that, in telling us those stories, he kept her alive for us. And actually, he made her come more fully to life for us than we had ever known her. When I look back, I can see that my dad used his grief to feed not just our stomachs, but our souls. So fast forward, many years later, I'm married, we've got 2 kids, and I've inherited none of my dad's or my grandma's culinary skills. But that's okay, because I am married to a Budweiser, macaroni and cheese and fish sticks kind of guy, and he doesn't care what I burn for dinner. He was a farmer, a football coach, a die-hard New York Giants fan, and a loving dad. He was a regular guy, but he was my regular guy. We'd been married just 20 years when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Not 2 years later, he was gone. We had a lovely service for him. Lots of the kids he coached came. 2 of them spoke. His brother spoke. And afterwards, his brother and sister-in-law hosted a repast for him that was better than some weddings I've been to. It was lovely. And still, I can recall feeling that if one more person came up to me and hugged me and said something supportive, I was going to throttle them. You know what I'm talking about, right? Things like, "You'll get over it. You'll get through it. You'll move on, Susan. I'll get over it. So now what? My husband's death is some sort of bridge I need to cross, and if I can get to the other side, it's going to be good there?" Like, I don't think so. "You'll get through it." That's my favorite, because right now, his death then is this raging river, and I've been plopped in the middle of it. And if I can just swim to the other side, it's going to be good. Well, you think so, because what you're suggesting is that I leave Stu in the river, and I'm not willing to do that. None of those platitudes worked for me. In fact, they just made me angry and agitated. And one of the things I recall most clearly about the days and the weeks after Stu's death is that I couldn't stop moving. I cleaned, I worked, I exhausted myself daily. You would think I'd be able to sleep, right? But no, Not at all. In fact, I wandered the house all night, every night, trying to distance myself from this pain that I didn't know what to do with. It was during one of those nights, late at night, that I suddenly remembered my dad sitting there with the TV off, thinking about my grandma. And it hit me. It was time to make myself be still. I was not keen on that idea. But I was so tired, and distracting myself wasn't working. And knowing how I didn't want to handle my grief wasn't helping me handle my grief. So I decided I would give it a try. I would sit with my grief, and I would think about Stu, and I would let myself just feel. It was awful, but I kept at it. I loved the ocean, so I decided to imagine my grief as an ocean, a beautiful, warm, blue expanse of water. And I sat in my ocean, and I let the waves wash over me. And some days they really knocked me around. But I didn't quit. I hung on day after day until one day I realized I could hear the rush of the water, but I no longer felt compelled to rush off with it. In making myself be still, I'd made peace with my pain. Now it was part of me. And being the person that I am, I thought it would only be polite to introduce it to the other parts of me. So I did. I introduced it to my blonde hair, my blue eyes, the fact that I can't add, and the fact that even after living in Virginia for 15 years, you know as soon as I open my mouth that I'm from New Jersey. Yeah. It was late in my stint in my imaginary ocean that I began to formulate this idea that we can take our grief and use it to do something good. It could be a big thing. I could go out and I could build a memorial to Stu. Or it could be a small thing, like my dad making my grandma's meals for us. Because what it comes down to is that it doesn't matter the magnitude of the gesture. What matters is that we take our grief and use it to do something good in our little corner of the universe. Since you are already well aware that I cannot cook, it will come as no surprise to you that I didn't channel my grief in the direction of my son's stomachs. Instead, I chose to use it to feed and strengthen their souls. When Stu was sick, the boys went on the back burner. This is awful to admit, but what makes it even worse is that my eldest has autism. When he was diagnosed, the doctors said, he'll never drive. He'll never go to college. He'll never live on his own. He'll never manage his own money or hold a job. So I took my pain and all of the guilt I felt at having been unable to focus on him for so long, and I poured it into helping him prove them wrong. I Googled, I made phone calls, I found programs and instructors, I hired job coaches and mentors. And together we proved them wrong 10 times over. As for my younger son, the little boy who was my rock during Stu's illness, I took my pain and used it first to help him navigate the depression that came when his dad died. I found the best psychiatrist, and then I found the best way to get him to listen to that person. I bribed him with video games. When he was back on track, together we turned our attention to finding the best fit for his significant athletic abilities. Would it be football? Would it be wrestling? Would it be track? As it turns out, it's rugby. And today, he's one of the best college rugby players in the country. Are those good things to have done with my grief? Are they big things? Well, hell yes, people. When you're grief-stricken, okay, if you can get up out of bed and get your kids to school on time, that's a win, folks, okay? And if you can get up and get dressed and not drive them in your pajamas, please, somebody should make margaritas. Yes, those were good things I did with my grief. And what it comes down to is that we can't do anything good with our grief if we don't first allow it in, absorb it, welcome it, and let it into the party in the first place. So please, from now on, let there be no more "you'll move ons, and you'll get over it, and you'll get through it." Instead, let there be sit with your grief. Let it become part of you. Let it simmer and see what it leads you to do. I'm willing to bet it's something wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.